All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Caitlin. Good evening, Mitchell. Thanks for joining me tonight. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Is everything working properly? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right, so this is the last workshop before the holiday. Next week, we will not meet on Tuesday. We will not meet on Wednesday. I think each of us, we have different plans for the holiday, but certainly not to do more economics. We all need some time to relax. So yeah, no workshop next week. We'll get back to work after the holiday. There is one remaining AS workshop, and I think there will be 5 or 6 additional A2 workshops for us to finish the microeconomic part of both syllabi, AS and A2 syllabi. Okay, and today for this A2 workshop, we will focus on two main topics, even though the first one that we can go through together tonight is not really something that appears in the syllabus, but that's something that I like to do before talking about market structures, because yes, there are 4 major market structures that we study in A2 economics. So I feel like before talking about each of them individually, I feel like it's important to just give some general information about what we call a market fail, what we call a market structure, not the market failure. What are the characteristics, and to have a closer look at each possible characteristic of a market structure. And this introduction usually proves quite useful because then it allows us to move much quicker when we talk about perfect competition, monopoly, oligopoly, and monopolistic competition. So it's not very long. Usually it just takes me about one lesson in general. And I also include the only part of the syllabus that is very, say, important and that is explicitly tested during the examination is the concept of concentration ratio, something that we use to measure the market power on the supply side. So this is something that is sometimes tested. There are some MCQs about that. But overall, what we are going to do in this first section is mostly to give general information about what we mean by market structure and what are the main characteristics. Okay, let's get started. And then we'll talk about perfect competition, of course, which is the benchmark, okay? One of the benchmark that we study in economics. Okay, introduction to market structures. Let's get started. So what is it? So first we can start with just a market as a way to make sure that everybody remembers such a simple definition. But remember, it's often the keywords that are that look the easiest, that are the most difficult to define, simply because there are many situations in which students, they focus on the definitions that they find more challenging, on the concepts that they find more challenging, and they forget how to define those very simple keywords. So that's why I like to remind them simple definitions: the market, a place for buyers and sellers to meet, and to trade goods, services. Could be also good services, could be assets, could be resources as well. Okay, the labor market is a market in which we trade resources. The real estate market, the housing market is a market in which we trade an asset, a physical asset, for example. And then what we essentially mean by a market structure is just the different characteristics, okay? The different characteristics of a market. So what I usually do during my lessons at that stage is I ask them, all right, if you walk into a market, so it could be a street market, it could be a mall, it doesn't really matter, it could be even just the internet, because the internet is just a big market in itself. a virtual market, a non-physical market. Then how would you describe it? I often ask that to the students. What information do you think is interesting if you want to describe the market you are visiting, for example? Okay, so in most cases, students will tell you about the products that you can buy. Do you have different sellers selling the same product, or do they all sell the same product? Often the students will tell you whether you have many different sellers, or if you have just a few. They often forget about the number of buyers, but you know that this is also something that is important. And basically, you can just have this conversation with them and just to try to talk to them and to get them to tell you what are the important characteristics of a market, the things that you should say when you describe a market. And then you can give them what the list of characteristics that will be important to us for A2 economics. So yeah, when we define a market structure, and this is true for all market structures that we will study this year, you must specify how many buyers and sellers you have. And it's also important to indicate their respective market shares. Why is this important? Because a market in which you have, let's say, 50 or 60 small sellers and one big seller, okay, we call that a dominant firm market. So 60 very small sellers that have, let's say, a 1% market share each, and one very large firm that has 40% market share. It's not the same market as one in which you have 61 small sellers, right? So that's why it's also important. The number of buyers and sellers matters, of course, but it's also important to know their size, okay? Are they of equal size, or do we have small ones and big ones? So that's why the market shares are important. Something that is also extremely relevant when we describe a market, it's about whether or not it's easy to enter the market. So mostly for businesses, okay, when we are talking about barriers to entry or exit, we mostly focus on businesses. Is it easy for a new business to enter a particular market? So by easy, I mean, is it cheap? Is it legal? Is this quick? Is there any risk when a business enters a market? All these factors, and we'll talk about barriers to entry a bit more precisely in a minute, are factors that can make it complicated or expensive or slow for a firm to enter a market. And we'll also talk about the barriers to exit, which is the same thing. Is it easy? Is this cheap? Is this quick for a firm to just leave the market? And we'll see that there are some reasons for which leaving a market might be actually quite expensive for a business, okay? We don't just abandon ship, jump in water and just escape from the market. Sometimes, well, it can cost you a lot of money if you want to exit a market, and we will see why this is the case. Be careful. Many students, they write barriers to exist. Okay, it's this. We are not talking about barriers to exist, but barriers to exit. So please emphasize the spelling please emphasize the spelling of exit. Just a sec. Okay, what else is important? Whether, as I mentioned earlier, whether the goods offered are identical or whether they are differentiated. So same thing, we'll talk about product differentiation, but essentially, do we have a situation where all the sellers in the market, they sell exactly the same product? Or do they sell products that are similar, but not exactly identical, okay? Because if, of course, if they are not even similar, then they are not in the same market, okay? You can't say that a car and a pair of shoes are differentiated products. They are just completely different. But if you have like two different, I don't know, models of shoes, or if you have two different, I don't know, fruits or types of grapes, these are differentiated products. Okay, so That's also an important characteristic of a market. Something else that matters is, especially for A2, we mostly focus on the market power on the supply side. So the extent to which sellers have control over price. It's a bit narrow because there are some situations where it's not really the sellers who have control over price, but it's the buyers who have control over price. A market in which the sellers have the market power, we call that sellers market, and the market in which the market power is on the demand side, we call that the buyer's market. Okay, so but for A2, for the for the four market structures that we study, we mostly study either perfectly competitive markets or markets where the market power is on the supply side. Okay, so is this can sellers control the price? Are there price maker? Can they increase the price? Can they decrease the price? And what is the extent of this market power? To what extent can they take advantage of a dominant position? Okay, so these are the four main things that matter to us. And when you think about it, the last one is actually a consequence of the three first characteristics. Okay, whether the seller can control the price depends on how many sellers there are, depends on the barriers to entry or exit, and it depends on whether or not the industry output is differentiated. Okay, so it's more like a consequence. It's not really something completely different from the three first characteristics. Okay, so far so good, no problem. So what I like to do now is to take each of those characteristics, okay, number of buyers, blah, 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 barriers to entry, and let's just have a closer look at it. So for the number of buyers and sellers, especially for the number of sellers and their respective market shares, what we do is to measure that is to use concentration ratios. It's very simple. There is not much to say about that, but just make sure your students practice and that they know how to calculate an n-firm concentration ratio. So n is an integer. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't matter, right? Usually, we often compute the 4-firm concentration ratio. Okay, so what is it? We just look at the largest firms within the market. Okay, so we rank the sellers by market share from largest market share to lowest market share. And we just look at, let's say, the n largest firm. So n can take any value, but let's say 3 or 4. And we just sum their market shares. Okay, that's it. That's pretty simple. And of course, if you take the 4 biggest firms in the industry, and if you find that overall they have a market share of 95%, well, what information does it give you? It gives you the information that those 4 big firms, they essentially control the market. Okay, they have a very strong power in the market. We say that the market is very concentrated. Very concentrated means that most vast majority of the market shares are in the hands of few firms. Could be 3, 4, 5, something like that. So it's likely that the market is going to be an oligopoly. Okay. On the other hand, if you have a concentration ratio that is, let's say, 12 or even 20%, if you take the 4 biggest firms and when you add their total market shares, it's only 20%, well, that signals that basically we are in a market in which you have many relatively small firms, which indicates that the market power on the supply side is relatively limited. And this suggests that this market is more competitive. This is not always true, but often because you have many smaller businesses, it's likely that competition is stronger. So yeah, so it's very useful. The concentration ratio gives you interesting information about whether you have a few firms controlling most of the market shares. In that case, the market is concentrated and competition is likely to be pretty weak. Strong market power for a few big businesses, low concentration ratio, many small firms, low market power on the supply side, and competition is likely to be quite tough. Okay. Okay, this is not very interesting. Yeah, because of course we have to be careful, and that's why concentration ratios, they are actually not very useful, because if you look at these two markets, okay, if you look at these two markets, market one and market two, and if I ask you to compute the full firm concentration ratio in both markets, you will find the same result, right? If so, 65% plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, okay, I just take the four largest firms, and I get 80%, okay? So in market one, the four biggest firms have a market share of a total market share of 80%. And in market two, same thing. But still, you see that these two market structures are very different. In market one, you have one very dominant firm, and then all the other firms are very small. And in market two, you have five firms of equal size. But if you calculate the concentration ratio in both markets, they give you the same result. So that's why in practice, we don't really use concentration ratios very often. We use something that is that can overcome this problem, but it's outside the scope of the syllabus. We use an index that we call the Erfindel-Hirschman index. I think it sounds German, right? Erfindel-Hirschman index. Which is better because you actually take the square of market shares, so it gives more weight to firms that have a big market share, and it gives less weight to firms that have a small market share. Okay, so it's one way to have an index that is a more reliable measurement of the actual market concentration. But we call it the HHI, is not part of the A2 syllabus. There are no essay questions or no MCQs on the HHI, so this is something you can skip. But if you want to talk about it to your students, feel free to do so, but you should tell them that they are not going to be tested on this. And you see, and if I take the same example with my two weird markets, and if I calculate the HHI, then you will actually conclude that market one is much more concentrated than market two, which suggests that there is more market power and less competition in market one than in market two. But again, outside the scope of the syllabus. So then what you can do, and I strongly suggest that you update the data here, because I collected some data about different markets, mostly in China, I think. So this is the market share of different businesses within a given market. So for example, here we have the shares of the China's B2C, so business to customer online shopping website by global market value, GMV, global market value, something like that. So this is in 2016, so this may have changed, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so honestly, I don't know them all. Okay, so first one is Taobao, of course, Tmall, JD as well. So these are all these like Amazon-like websites in China. And what you can ask your students is just, okay, compute the full firm concentration ratio. So they only have to calculate to sum the market shares of the four biggest companies, and they are already ranked by a market share. So that makes their job very easy. And just once they have calculated the concentration ratio, to ask them, okay, what do you think? Would you say that this market is concentrated? Do you expect competition to be tough in this market? Do you feel like those big firms, they have a strong market power, a weak market power, something like that? So this is for online shopping. This is the smartphone market in 2016. So again, that's the data that I found. The data has probably changed a lot. We have a Xiaomi, Honor, Letvi. I don't know how to pronounce it. Apple, Huawei, Meizu, 360, Samsung. So same thing, you can calculate the concentration ratio. It looks like it's going to be smaller, okay? If you look at online shopping, it's going to be pretty much 95, 96%. So it's pretty massive. If you look at this one, we will be closer, 41, 50, 60%. So it's still a lot, it's still pretty high, but it seems like this market is less concentrated than the online shopping market. And if you look at the airline market, So again, this might have changed since 2017. This is, sorry, 2017. But same thing, you see that it is not as concentrated as the online shopping market. So here, what do we have? We have about, okay, about 40, 55, okay, 60, if I'm 67%, something like that, a bit less than 70%. So that makes it very concentrated, but not as concentrated as the market for online shopping. So that's pretty easy. You can search your own data if you want to. If you are interested in a specific market, you can even ask your students to do some research about markets in which they are interested, and then to calculate the concentration ratio and to draw conclusions about whether they expect the market to be competitive or not. All right. So that was about the first point. Remember when we talked about the characteristics of the market? Yes, how many buyers and sellers do we have and the market share? So this was the first point. Second point is about the size, the existence and the size of barriers to entry or exit. And again, exit, not exist. So the first thing that you got to do is to define what do we call a barrier to entry. So that's a definition that I like. So barriers to entry, they are obstacles, okay? Obstacle, which deter or prevent new firms from entering a particular market to compete with incumbent firms. Okay, so this definition is a bit complicated. So it's important to explain the different terms. So an obstacle, yes, it's something that is in your way, okay? Something that prevents you to go somewhere. You can just tell them, okay, if you walk on the street and there is a wall, so you cannot move forward, then the wall is an obstacle. It's important to explain the difference between deter and prevent. And if deter is too complicated, you can replace them by discourage. Maybe that's easier for the students to use discourage. Prevent, it's just you can't do it. Okay, prevent it, no. It's about whether it is possible or not. Deter or discourage is, yeah, you could do it, but you choose not to. Okay, so you can, but you choose not to, simply because you believe that it is not in your best interest to enter a particular market. Prevent, you can't. We'll see some situations in which a firm cannot enter a market even if you really wants to. Okay, and then to compete with what we call the incumbent firms, I hope my pronunciation is right. What do we call an incumbent firm? Is a firm which is already in the market. Okay, so the firms outside the market, we call them the potential entrants. Okay, firms who consider whether or not to enter a particular market. And the firms who are already operating inside the market, we call them the incumbent firms. All right. And there are many examples or many reasons for which it might be difficult or even impossible for businesses to enter a particular market. And I think it's important to explain, to give examples of those barriers to entry. Because there are some essay questions, especially about the monopolistic markets, in which students are expected to give examples of barriers to entry to explain what this is about. So the obvious one could be high startup cost, when it just costs a lot of money to enter the market because there is a huge fixed cost or a huge startup cost. You need to buy a lot of equipment, machines, buildings, a lot of expenditure on advertisement, marketing, construction, and smaller businesses might simply not have access to that amount of, when I mean capital here, could be mostly financial capital. Simply, they don't have enough funds, enough money to finance the purchase of all these resources that are necessary to start the business. So they, even if they want to enter, they are unable to do so because it's too costly to start up the business. So yeah, you can give examples in the aircraft industry. Think about it. Think Is this easy to start an aircraft business? Can you imagine how many billions of dollars you would need just to start up your business? Same thing, a pharmaceutical company, if you're in electricity industry, well, you need hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to start your business, and very few firms have the financial ability to do so. Could be that you can't enter the market because you know that you will not have access to the raw materials that you need. You might not have access to some components, or you might not have access to some retail outlets to sell your products. I give some examples. Your students, they probably know Ferrero, which is this an Italian company? It sounds Italian. You know, it's the company that produces the Nutella, like chocolate and hazelnut. They also produce the Mon Chéri, and they produce the Ferrero Rocher, you know, this pretty delicious chocolate with hazelnut. And what Ferrero did, because they produced chocolate with hazelnut, they actually purchased or took over all the farms that produced hazelnuts, because they apparently, I'm not an expert, but apparently they use a very special type of hazelnut, a very particular variety of hazelnut that only grows in certain areas. I think it's in Italy and Turkey. And Ferrero, just to make sure that the other chocolate company were not able to use the same hazelnuts and therefore were not able to compete with them, they took over all these hazelnut farms, or those fields, or those mountains. I don't exactly know where they grow. So, which means that if you want to compete with Ferrero, it's pretty complicated, because you will not have access to this special kind of hazelnut. So you might produce some chocolate, but you will have to use a different type of hazelnut that might not be as tasty. So yeah, if you anticipate that you will not be able to find the resources that you need to be competitive, well, you might choose not to enter a market. Same thing for components. If you feel like you will not be able to purchase some, I don't know, rare earth, how do we call that? Rare earth elements. If you will anticipate you will not be able to purchase uranium or things like that, in that case, you will choose not to enter. I also give the example of De Beers diamond monopoly, because De Beers, so it's a huge company that owns, I forgot the number, but something like 70 or 80% of all diamond mines in the world. So that same thing, that might be very, very complicated if you want to produce, to extract and produce diamonds, because this company pretty much owns all the diamond mines. So it's going to be very complicated unless you can find new places to extract diamonds. So if you want to create artificial diamonds, but if you want to produce natural diamonds, that's going to be very complicated, because you have this company that controls all the supply of diamonds. Okay, so if you can't find the resources, you might choose not to enter the market. This one is actually quite easy to explain, and this is one that students understand pretty well, and that's going to be very important for the concept of natural monopoly. Economies of scale, so, well, we've already talked about that before. The idea here is that at first, when a business enters a market, usually at the beginning, it starts at a low scale of production. Okay, you don't enter the market and have a 60% market share right away. Usually you enter the market, you start with a very small market share, 1%, 2%, and then if you are successful, you can increase this market share over time, and okay. But the problem is that if you start in the market, if you start with a very low market share, and if we are talking about the production for which there are substantial economies of scale, if you start producing a low level of output, this means that your average cost of production is going to be very high. On the other hand, if you have firms, the firms with whom you compete, your competitors, if they have a much larger market share because they have been in the market for 10 years already, if they have a much larger scale of production, they are likely to produce at a much lower average cost. So the idea is that in these markets in which there are substantial economies of scale, it's very difficult for new firms to enter because they will suffer from a cost disadvantage. So they might, firms that are still considering whether or not to enter the market, they might choose not to, simply because they can anticipate that they will not be sufficiently competitive, not sufficiently productively efficient, if you want, and therefore they will not be able to compete with the firms that are already in the market. So those three first examples are examples of barriers that deter new firms or discourage new firms from entering the market. They could enter, but they choose not to because they anticipate that this would not look very good if they tried to succeed in this market. The fourth one is different. Legal barriers are barriers to entry that prevent new firms from entering the market. Even if they want to, they can't. So it could be copyrights, could be a patent. So remember, a patent is when a firm introduces an innovation and the government gives a monopoly power to the innovator for a certain period of time, usually 20, 25 years. So this business, the innovator, is the only one who has the right to use the innovation. So in that case, this might exclude some other businesses from this market because they are not authorized to use the innovation. Could be licenses, or could be just a public monopoly. The government decides that this product is only going to be produced by the government. Private businesses are not allowed to produce it. So even though private businesses might be interested in entering the markets, they can't because the government forbids it. Could be, I think in China, a good example could be cigarettes. So again, students have told me that the government is responsible for, or at least public companies produce cigarettes in China, and that private businesses are not allowed to produce cigarettes themselves, even though they probably wish they could, given how profitable this industry is. Okay, what else do we have? Could be that they are very high sunk cost. So the concept of sunk cost is going to be interesting, especially when we talk about the shutdown price in a perfect competition, which is actually very similar to high startup cost. Okay, actually, I could have put it together. A sunk cost is a cost that you have already incurred and therefore you can't recover it. It doesn't matter what you do. It's lost. Okay, it's not like if you buy a car. If you buy a car, okay, it's a cost, but you can still resell it. So you might lose a little bit of money in the process because the price at which you sell it is likely to be lower than the price at which you buy it. Okay, but at least you can recover some of it. A sunk cost could be something like advertising. If you pay $1 million for a TV advertisement, once this cost is paid, there is no way you can recover it. And why is this? Why can this act as a barrier to entry? Simply because it makes failure more expensive. If you fail in the market, if you try, you enter the market, you do your best, but unfortunately, competition is too harsh. So you decide to leave the market. If you can sell most of your machines, for example, so if you can recover most of your cost, then failure is not such a big deal because you don't lose a lot of money. But if most of your costs are sunk costs, so costs that you cannot recover, so if you fail, it's just lost, you lose everything. That makes failure more costly, and therefore that makes entry more risky. And therefore, this might deter some firms from entering the market simply because they anticipate that if they fail, it's going to be pretty bad because they will not be able to recover the cost that they have already incurred. Could be limit pricing. Limit pricing is when the firms inside the market, they set a very, very, very low price just to discourage new firms from entering. It's like sending a message, okay? They try to mislead the firms which are outside the market, because of course the firms outside the market, when they have to decide whether or not to enter, they will look at the market price inside the market just to have an idea of how profitable it would be for them to enter. And if they see that the market price is very low, they might, this gives them two information. This gives them, okay, so basically either this market is not very profitable, or simply because competition is too hard. Okay, if the price is very, very low, this means that there is a very tough price competition, and they anticipate that they will not be able to make a lot of profit inside this market, and they might simply choose to stay outside of it. In practice, limit pricing can be just a strategy to pretend that the market is not profitable when the firms inside the market, they feel like there is a threat of an entry. If the firms inside the market, if they know that there is a business outside the market who's considering entering the market and competing with them, they might artificially decrease the price of their product just to send them a wrong signal, something like, oh, you see, in this market, we fight really hard. The price is very, very low. So, well, you should not enter because there's not a lot of money to make in this market. And then as soon as the threat is gone, as soon as the business outside the market has just given up and has chosen not to enter, the firms inside the market, they, especially if they collude, they can raise the price again just after the threat is gone. There might be some marketing barriers, which is, again, one that students, they like to explain because it's quite easy. So that eventually refers to brand loyalty. If there is a market in which brand loyalty is extremely strong, it's going to be very, very, very hard for a new business to convince consumers to purchase their products because they don't really have a brand image yet. Okay, it usually takes a long time to build a brand image within a market, and that will basically, what it means is that the PED is very low in the market. Consumers are captive, they are not very responsive to price changes, and they don't even really see the new firms inside the market because they are loyal to the brand or to the variety of the product that they purchase. So yeah, very hard to gain market shares if you are a new business and if you are in an environment in which consumers are already loyal to one brand. Think about it. If you have a new company that produces high quality smartphones, but that doesn't really have a brand image yet, it's going to be very hard for this new smartphone company to compete with Apple and Samsung, or even Huawei. Very hard because they have no brand image, or they have, let's say, a weaker brand image. So the business outside the market, they might anticipate that, hey, if we enter, we're not going to do very well because we don't really know how to convince buyers to switch from their current product to our product. And there can be some network externalities, but this is a bit more advanced. So I suggest you don't talk about this to your students. Okay, it's a bit more advanced. All right, so these are examples of barriers to entry. And overall, a business will choose to enter only if it believes that it's worth it. So if the economic returns that it will receive from its activity inside the market is greater than the cost of breaking down the barriers to entry. Because yes, it's costly to break down those barriers. It's worth it if you expect to make a lot of money in this market. Of course, there is an element of risk. You don't really know how hard it will be to break those barriers, and you don't really know how profitable your activity will be in this market. So there is a lot of risk and uncertainty when a business has to choose whether or not to enter a particular market. The concept of barrier to exit is the same, but now it's these obstacles that prevent a firm from leaving a market quickly and at little cost. There are essentially three main factors, even though we could actually combine the number one and number three, because it's the same idea but for different resources. There might simply be high redundancy costs, because if you want to leave a market quickly, you might have to lay off many workers before the end of their contract. And most contracts, they impose a penalty on the party who breaks the contract. Okay, as an employee, if you break the contract, you might have to lose benefits or even to pay some kind of a penalty. But that's true also for businesses. If the employer breaks a contract in many situations, the employer will have to pay a penalty or a fine or to compensate the employee. And that can be extremely costly, especially if you have to lay off a large number of employees. And that's what we call the redundancy costs. Could be the sunk costs, what we have already talked about. It might be very quickly for you to leave the market if you are unable to sell your physical capital. There are some industries in which businesses use very specific capital equipment. Could be capital equipment that they have designed to produce a specific model of car, for example. Could be a company that produces very expensive watches, and they might use some capital equipment that is, again, very specific to produce one model of watch that they produce. And why is this a problem? Because if we have a lot of capital equipment that us only can use, it means we can't sell it to anyone else. So it's just, we just throw it away. A good example is the Tesla company, who produces cars. They use, I forgot the name, I think we call that hyperpress or gigapress. Tesla, you can Google it if you want. Tesla has a very unique way of producing electric cars, because instead of combining many small parts, they try to produce a minimum number of pieces. Okay, so, and in order for them to reduce the number of pieces that they assemble, they produce very large pieces of metal. I think that's mostly metal. I don't know exactly what type of alloy this is. And they use a huge machine. Okay, you know what? Let's have a look at it together, because I actually watched a YouTube video on this, and it was quite impressive. I think it's called the Gigapress, Tesla Gigapress. Oh, I don't have my VPN on. Maybe I'll have to use on Bing's Tesla Gigapress. Was it the name? Gigapress, yes. So, okay. Yeah, that's essentially something like that. That's a gigapress. So it's just pretty big, right? It's a huge machine, and you inject liquid, I don't know what that is, liquid steel or something like that, and then the gigapress is gonna mold it into an element of the Tesla car. Well, think about that. If Tesla goes bankrupt, what do you think they are gonna do with this machine? Do you think they can sell it to anyone else? Those machines are very, very specific. Perhaps they can sell some components, but I'm not even sure about it. They can't really sell that to anyone else. We say that this type of capital equipment is simply non-transferable. Okay, it's something you cannot just sell to someone else. You cannot just transfer it to another business. So that makes this type of cost, when you purchase this type of equipment, it's a sunk cost. Once you have purchased it, there is no one you can sell it to. Okay, so it's just gone. So it might you might lose a lot of money, because, well, there's nothing you can do with those fixed assets. You can just put this to a very big bin. And same thing, there can be some, you might have to break contracts, the contracts of your employees, but you might also have to break contracts with your suppliers or with your buyers, with your customers. And again, you might have to pay some penalties. So for example, if you committed to produce and sell 100 units of something to a specific buyer, and if you choose to leave the market, so you choose to break this contract, you might have to compensate the buyer who was relying on you. And same thing, if you committed to purchase 100 tons of steel from a given company, and this given company has already started production, and you eventually say, oh, finally, I changed my mind. I don't need that steel anymore because I'm leaving the industry. Well, same thing, you are breaking the contract, so you might have to pay very important penalties to compensate the supplier. Okay, so these are barriers to exit, in the sense that it's not free to leave the market, and you might actually be better off to wait until your contracts expire, or until your non-transferable fixed assets have completely depreciated, so the loss in value that you incur when you exit the market remains limited. Okay, so yes, so even if you make a loss in the market, it might actually be better to stay, at least for a little longer, because if you leave right away, you might have to pay more than what you currently lose in the market. So it might actually be better to incur a small loss rather than leaving and paying very high penalties. That's the basic idea. Okay, good. So we are done with barriers to entry. This was the biggest part. We only need to talk about product differentiation. That's going to be quite quick, and to talk about what it means to be price maker or price taker. And we will be done with this first topic. Any questions so far, or should we move on and talk about product differentiation? Okay. So remember, product differentiation, it's about being in a market in which different sellers sell similar products, but not identical. We say that the products are substitutes, but they are imperfect substitutes, okay? If all products were identical, then we would have perfect substitutes. So it could be different brands of something, okay? Seiko versus Orient watches, Mercedes-Benz versus BMW, Pepsi versus Coke, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, if all firms sell the same product, then we say that the industry output is standardized. Okay, so all businesses sell the same product, standardized, or we sometimes say homogeneous output, but I feel like it's easier to say identical or standardized. Okay, now this is the important part. If within the market, all firms sell exactly the same product, then they are perfect substitutes, okay, from the perspective of consumers. Basically, they really don't care who they buy from. So the only thing that matters to consumers is the price. So consumers, they will always buy from the cheapest supplier. Price is the only selection criterion for consumer. And that's why in this case, it's likely that price competition is going to be very, very tough. If everyone sells exactly the same product, businesses, it's very important for businesses to be to offer the product at the lowest possible price, because this is the only thing that matters to consumers. That's the idea. On the other hand, if we are in a market where businesses, they sell similar but still different products, so in that case, consumers will regard the products as substitutes because they are similar, but as imperfect substitutes because they are not exactly the same. What it means is that, of course, the price will still be important to help the consumer to choose from which seller to purchase the product, but the price is no longer the only thing that matters. There might be other characteristics of the product that will determine what the consumer wants to buy. Could be the design, could be the size, could be the quality, could be the location. The location is also matters. All these factors will play a role in the consumer decision of where they should buy the product from which seller they should purchase the product. And the consequence, and that's really what matters here, is that if you have two firms, firm A and firm B, and even if firm A charges a higher price, well, you might still have some consumers buying the product from firm A, even if it's more expensive, simply because consumers, they like firm A's product better. Maybe the color, maybe the quality, maybe the design, the location. This is something that is impossible if all firms sell the same product. So the idea here is that product differentiation creates market power. I can charge a higher price and still have people purchasing the product from me because I differentiate my product, and consumers, they like my product better and they are ready to pay a higher price for my product. So this gives me market power, this gives me the ability to raise the price, and therefore this reduces the intensity of competition. I make consumers more captive, more loyal to my product because they like it better. So why do businesses try to differentiate their product? Because it gives them the possibility to raise the price and because it reduces the intensity of competition. Yes. Yes, that's the basic idea. Okay. Finally, the difference between being price taker and being price maker. So in this PPT, I focused on what it means for a firm to be price taker and what it means for a firm to be price maker. The concept of price taking buyer and price making buyer also makes sense. But for the four market structures that we study, we will never study market power on the demand side, only market power on the supply side. So that's why I focus on price-taking businesses. The only exception that we will have this year is when we study the labor market. We will study a monopsonistic labor market. And in that case, the sellers, they are price taker, but the buyers are price maker. But we'll talk about that later. During our last workshop, actually, on the labor market. So what does it mean to be price taker or to be a price taking firm? It simply means that whatever you do, what you do has no influence on the market price. So yeah, your actions are irrelevant in the sense that they don't influence the market price. Usually this is because you are too small. You are one small business among thousands or millions of other businesses. So what you do is just insignificant compared with the overall size of the market. So when we talk about price-taking businesses, what we usually mean is that it doesn't matter how much they sell. It doesn't matter whether I sell 1, 2, 20, 200 to 1,000 units of a product. The market price is going to remain exactly the same because I'm too small. I'm just epsilon among infinity. I'm just and actually something that is quite funny is that to emphasize that when firms are price taker, we say that supply is atomistic. Let me write it. We say that supply is atomistic, like an atom. Is like if supply is just a combination of atoms. So it's you have many small, very small things. And we say the same thing about demand. Okay, demand is atomistic if you have many small buyers. So of course, what one atom is doing doesn't really have any influence on the rest. Okay, on the system overall. Assuming it doesn't create some reaction chains, but yes, supply is atomistic, many small businesses, so it doesn't matter how much they produce, each of them produce, I mean, this has no influence on the overall market price. Okay. Right, and yes, among the 4 market structures that we will study, the only one in which businesses are price taker is perfect competition. In monopoly, of course, they are price maker. In oligopoly, they are price maker. And in monopolistic competition, they are also price maker. They have an influence on the market price. The opposite is price making. We say that a firm is a price maker or is a price making if it has some market power, at least some, could be just a little bit market power, could be a massive market power. For example, in monopolistic competition, the market power is usually quite weak, but in the monopoly, it's a very strong market power. But in both cases, this market power allows the firm to influence the market price, could be to control the market price or to influence it. And in that case, the more output that business sells, the lower the price that it has to charge, because in that case, it is facing a downward sloping demand curve. And in this case, the only way you can sell more output is to decrease the price that you charge. Okay, so the more output a business sells, the lower the market price. So yes, the demand curve is downward sloping, unlike what happens in a price-taking firm, but we will talk about that in a minute when we talk about perfect competition. And yes, in a monopolistic competition, and in an oligopoly, in these 3 market structures, firms are price maker. They have the ability to influence the market price. Okay. This is how I like to summarize this chapter. So we have 4 primary models of market structures: perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. So that's the 4 structures that students must know. And what we can do is simply to use this big table to summarize what are the characteristics of each market structure. Okay, so perfect competition, we have many firms, they all sell the same product. Firms are price taker, so they have no control over the price, and there are no barriers to entry or exit. In a monopoly, which is, so perfect competition is one benchmark, monopoly is another benchmark. They are like these 2 first market structures. They are not meant to be realistic. They are mostly theoretical, but they are useful because they provide a benchmark against which we can compare more realistic market structures. So how many firms? Just one. I should also mention that we have only one firm, but we have many buyers, just like in perfect competition, many firms and many buyers. So we have only one firm, so selling one single product. So basically the concept of product differentiation is not relevant. There is a very strong market power. Okay, of course, the monopolist is price maker, and because it is the only seller, because they are very high barriers to entry and no close substitutes, this gives the monopolist a very strong power. And they are prohibitive barriers to entry. Prohibitive means that they are extremely high, so nobody can enter. It's impossible to enter because the barriers to entry are too high. Nobody can enter. Especially to enter, okay? Barriers to exit, it's not quite relevant, but the barriers to entry are very high. Monopolistic competition, we have many firms, many small firms. Each of them produces a differentiated product. Firms are price maker because because product differentiation gives them some market power. But if we compare with the market power of a monopoly, it is usually much smaller because there are no barriers to entry and because there are many other competitors. So there might be some market power. Yes, the firm is price maker to some extent. It really depends on how strong product differentiation is. The stronger product differentiation, the stronger the market power of a monopolistically competitive firm. And there are no barriers to entry or exit. In some textbooks, I find low barriers to entry or exit, but in theory, there are just none. There are no barriers to entry, zero barriers to entry or exit. Otherwise, the diagrams that we use don't work. Okay, so no barriers to entry or exit. Oligopolies, there are a few large firms that control most of the market shares. The output can be differentiated and sometimes it is not. It depends. There are different models of oligopolies. So for example, the most famous model in which there is no product differentiation is the Cournot competition. And one example in which product differentiation exists could be something like, something that we call the Hotelling model, in which firms differentiate by price, in which firms achieve product differentiation by choosing a location. I can write it down if you want. It's one of my favorite IO model. Very interesting. We call that the Hotelling model. So in this model, product differentiation is achieved through geographic decisions. And Cournot competition usually assumes that all firms sell the same product. Okay, so it depends on the model you consider. But in most cases, we usually assume that there is product differentiation simply because it is more realistic than no product differentiation. The firm's control of a price varies a lot. It depends on how many firms you have inside this oligopoly. It depends on how they compete. Do they compete by price? Do they compete by quantity? Do they compete by location? Do they compete through non-price competition? It varies a lot. It's very difficult to determine how strong the market power is in an oligopoly. That's what makes this market structure very complicated to analyze, because you can have so many possible configurations depending on how firms compete, depending on their characteristics, depending on their size, and so on. And in this market, yes, there are considerable, especially barriers to entry. There are considerable barriers to entry. They are not prohibitive like in a monopoly, so it's still possible to break down those barriers, and it's still possible for new firms to enter the market, but it's usually very difficult to enter, mostly because there are important economies of scale, which just give a very strong cost advantage to the firms who are already in the market. So that makes it difficult for new firms to enter this market. Okay, so of course, this is just an overview of what we are going to do over the next few weeks. So don't give too much detail to your students. Just tell them that, all right, this is what's going to keep us busy for a while. And now what we have to do is just to take a closer look at each of those market structures. And that's it. Yeah, that's one step further. Okay, we are done with topic number 1. Let me show you what the extra documents you can find on the website. As always, the concept cards. Here you have 2 drawing challenges, a Smurf. You all know what a Smurf is. I don't know in China if they are popular. Smurf, yes, you know the Smurf. And Shrek, you all know Shrek. All right. These are the drawing challenges for this topic. You have the definitions, which you can also find on the website. And you have the summary. 3 pages. Actually, almost only 2. but because that you have the big table at the end. Okay, but yes, in 3 pages, almost 2, you have the key ideas on everything there is to know about market structures, introduction to market structures. So yeah, this is not really something that I found in the textbooks, but I think it's useful. I think it's useful to just prepare the students for what's ahead. What's ahead? Perfect competition. All right. Before we start, I'm going to get some water. If you have some questions, please type your questions in the chat box about introduction to market structures. And I will be back in 1 minute so we can start talking about perfect competition. I'll be back in a minute. No questions? Are we ready to talk about perfect competition? That's a very important topic. There are very often essay questions in which your students should talk about the content of this particular topic. Could be questions on efficiency. It could be questions on the various market structures, especially comparing monopoly and perfect competition, which is rather common essay question. Shall we? Are we ready? Do you still have some energy left? I hope you do. All right, I'll take this as a yes. Okay, let's get started. Perfect competition. All right, so we've already described the characteristic, but let's just summarize. What do we find when we look at perfect competition? What are we talking about? What are the characteristics? So yes, many buyers and sellers. That's a typical mistake. Many students will just say many sellers. If you have many sellers, but just a few buyers, then it's not perfect competition. Or if you have, for example, many sellers and just one buyer, well, you know that's a monopsony. And if you have many sellers and of just a few buyers, it's an oligopsony. Oligopsony. So that's why you have to really say what happens on the supply side and what happens on the demand side. Many buyers and sellers, and it's not enough to tell how many they are. It's also important to mention that none of them have a large market share. Okay, so otherwise you could have 2,000 small sellers and one very big one that has a very strong market power. So you still have many sellers, but if you have one that is much bigger than all the rest, that's not perfect competition. Okay, so many small buyers and sellers. That's what you can say. All right, no barriers to entry or exit. We said that. And you know how to give examples of barriers to entry or exit. We say that there is free entry and exit. It's free to enter and it's free to exit. The industry output is homogeneous, which means that all businesses sell exactly the same product. So if you don't like the keyword homogeneous, you can just say all firms sell the same product. Why does it matter? Because yes, in that case, the only thing that matters for buyers is the price. They will always buy the product from the cheapest seller. And yes, there is perfect information. It's also important, but this is not something that is specific to perfect competition. It is also true in all the other market structures that we will study. And in some textbooks, I find something very weird. I have found some books in which they say that in a monopoly, information is imperfect, which is definitely wrong. If you look at a typical monopoly model, there is still perfect information. Of course, there is perfect information. Unless you are talking about second-degree price discrimination, which is a very special case. But if you look at a uniform monopolist, so uniform, which means one single price, there is perfect information. And it's important because in our case, this means that buyers, they know the prices charged by each seller. Because if this was not the case, it would be possible that a seller charging a high price could convince some buyers to buy from its products, okay? Because perhaps the consumers, they don't know that there is another seller offering the same product at a lower price. So, which means that even if you charge a price above the market price, if you sell your product at a higher price than everybody else, if there is imperfect information, you might find some buyers who don't know that they can find it cheaper somewhere else and that buy your product at a higher price. But there is perfect information, so this is impossible. Okay. So of course, is this realistic? No, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the real world, like we say. It's an ideal form of competition. It's a theoretical framework, but again, it doesn't mean that it is useless. It is interesting because we can use it as a benchmark. Okay, a benchmark is something that we use as to compare things that are more realistic. Okay, so it's a theoretical benchmark. That's why it's useful. If you are trying to find examples of markets that are very, very competitive and that could be very close to perfect competition, probably the best example would be the market for some agricultural commodities. Could be some fruits, could be some cereals, because you have many small producers. Depends on some countries. In some countries, it's the agricultural production is controlled by a small number of big firms, but especially in developing countries, you have so many local producers, local farmers that sell products that are not exactly the same, but very similar, almost identical. There are usually low barriers to entry and exit in agricultural production, and yes, many buyers and sellers. So it's probably what gets the closest to a perfectly competitive market. But again, it doesn't exist in the real world. There are no pure example of perfect competition. Okay, so who sets the price? No one and everyone. This is what sometimes students struggle to understand. But this is basically the market forces of supply and demand. When you graph a market, a supply and demand diagram, you are representing, so even if we have never really told that to the students, because we've always just used supply and demand diagrams, but we never really told them that this supply and demand diagram assumes that there is perfect competition. Okay, so supply and demand means perfect competition. So how do we set the price in that case? Well, we just look at the price at which the quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded. Okay, and we know the mechanism. If you don't remember, please go back to the AS workshop on the price mechanism. We know how the equilibrium price will be reached in a market where you have supply and demand. If the price is too high, there will be a surplus, the price will go down. If the price is too low, there will be a shortage, the price will go up. Okay, but the point is that it's collectively that the market price is going to be determined, because remember, each individual buyer, each individual seller is too small to have an influence on the overall market price. It's the combination of thousands of millions of decisions, the interaction between millions of buyers and millions of sellers, who will eventually determine the market equilibrium price through the interaction or the market forces of supply and demand. Yes, that's really something that is important. Each individual buyer or seller is too small to have an influence on the market price. It doesn't matter how much they buy or sell. So how much they buy for buyers, how much they sell for sellers. Okay, so let me now talk about something that is, to me, at least, it's very important if we really want to understand perfect competition. And I feel like textbooks, they don't really explain that. So I've always struggled a bit to understand that. It took me some time. I think now I found a good way to explain it. In many textbooks, they just tell you that, all right, this is the individual firm. There is a market price, P star, and the firm can't control it. It's just determined by market supply and market demand. And they tell you, all right, so the firm is going to charge this price. So that's what the individual demand, DI, stands for individual demand. So the demand to this particular firm, that's not the market demand, okay? The demand to one individual firm is like. But then I really don't like this representation, because it doesn't make it very clear what happens if the firm tries, because yes, it can try. If the firm tries to sell its output at a price above the market equilibrium price, okay, if we say that P star is the market equilibrium price, okay, supply and demand, okay, that's P star, that's the market demand and that's the market supply, okay, so the market forces of supply and demand set the equilibrium price, all right? But what if I wanted to give it a try as a seller? I said, all right, I'm going to try to sell my output at a price above P star. Well, in that case, remember, because buyers, they know everything. They know that everybody else sells their product at P star. I am the only one with the price above P star. And because I sell exactly the same product as everyone else, well, nobody will buy my product or will buy the product from me. I should put it this way because it's the same. Nobody will buy the product from me if I charge a price above P star. So my individual demand will actually be 0. Okay, above P star, this is what my individual demand looks like, 0. Nobody wants to buy from me. Okay. What if I charge a price that is less than P star? Can I do that? Yes, I could. Why not? I can do whatever I want with the price that I put on the price tag. Well, in that case, what happens is that if I am the only one with a price below P star, below the market equilibrium price, then I have the opposite case. Everybody wants to buy from me, right? Because again, I charge a price that is less than everybody else. Everybody knows that because there is perfect information. And I sell the same product as everyone else. So in that case, everyone wants to buy from me. So below P star, I would face the total market demand, which is very big. Okay, the total market demand. So that's why we usually don't represent it, because it's very, very, very large. It's too large for me because I am too small. I would be simply unable to meet this huge market demand because I am such a small firm. Remember, I am one atom. I am one atom in this market. So I cannot face the entire market demand. It would actually look like that. Okay. Above P star, nobody wants to buy from me. And below P star, this would be the total market demand. Maybe we can see it better here, okay? So that's the market equilibrium price, okay, P star. If I try to charge a price above P star, nobody wants to, P1, for example, nobody wants to buy from me. If I charge a price below P star, I face the entire, my individual demand is the same as the market demand because everybody wants to buy from me, okay? And then at P star, what happens if I charge exactly the market price? Well, we make an assumption. The assumption that we make is basically you can sell as much as you want. To be more precise, you can sell any quantity between 0 and the total market quantity Q star. All right. You can sell as much as you want. So this is what your individual demand curve really looks like in perfect competition. Okay. However, because this is like what my cost curves look like. So basically, this is only the relevant range of output. This is what I can really produce. I cannot produce more than that because I am too small compared with the size of the market. So all this section, and in particular the downward sloping section, it's just irrelevant to me. It's just too big. I can ignore it. So that's why we usually don't represent this section of the individual demand curve. Just too big for me. So we usually just represent this part. And again, usually we don't even draw this. It's a convention. We don't even draw the vertical section. So that's why we often end up like this. But sometimes students, they struggle to understand that. So I feel like this representation might actually be easier to understand. Nobody above P star, everybody below P star, and as much as I want at P star. Yes, that's why we say that my individual demand curve, DI, which is also my average revenue, we know that, is perfectly elastic at P star. Quantity 0 above P star, quantity very large, not infinite, but very large below P star. All right, and that's essentially why I explain here. I think it's interesting to explain it to the students. If you feel like this is too complicated and if you want to just skip this part and just tell the students the individual demand curve of a competitive firm is just horizontal at the market price, yeah, okay, you can say that, but I feel like it's more interesting to explain to them where it comes from. So yes, if I charge a price above the market price, nobody wants to buy from me, and therefore I will never do it. Yeah, I have no incentive to charge a price above the market price. I would not be able to sell anything. If I charge exactly the market price and we make an assumption, you can sell as much as you want at the market price, so any quantity between 0 and the entire market quantity demanded, Q star. So that's why, because you can sell as much as you want at the market price. That's why the individual demand curve is perfectly price elastic. Careful when you talk about perfect competition. It's always important to distinguish between the market demand and the individual demand. Okay, so do not just say the demand because we don't know what you're talking about. Okay, are you talking about the total market demand, or are you talking about the demand facing one individual firm? Okay, so the individual demand is horizontal, perfectly price elastic at the market price. And when you think about it, because you can sell as much output as you want at the market price, you don't have an incentive to charge less than the market price. Usually businesses, they decrease the price to sell more output, okay, to gain market shares. They decrease the price to be able to sell more. In perfect competition, it's not necessary. You can sell as much as you want at the market price. So that's why you will never, the business will never charge less than the market price. There is no need to cut the price below the market price to sell more output. And that's why we sell, we sell. That's why we say that firms in perfect competition, they are price taker, because they will never charge more than the market price, because they would face no demand, and they will never charge less than the market price, because they have no incentive to do so. They can sell as much as they want at the market price. So in perfect competition, firms will always charge the market price. So they just take the market price as given and they charge the market price. No more than it, no less than it. Because of course, yes, what would happen if I charged a price below the market price? I would face the entire market demand, and I am too small to supply the entire market, and I simply don't have an incentive to do so, because I can sell as much as I want at the market price. All right. Okay, so that's really what my individual demand curve looks like. This green stair shape. No one above P star, as much as I want at P star, the entire market below P star. But usually, yes, we just simplify it and just represent it as a horizontal line at P star. Yeah, thanks, Mitchell. I think it's interesting, because if you open a textbook, it's just going to give you this. And I've always struggled to understand why. So I hope that now it's a bit more clear. I hope it makes more sense. All right, so we are ready. Yes, we are ready to talk about the equilibrium. What's going to happen in a perfectly competitive market? Something that is actually quite interesting is about the difference between the short run and the long run. Because remember, when we talked about production, we actually said that the difference between the short run and the long run in perfect competition is that, in a production theory, is that in the short run, capital is fixed and labor is variable. And in the long run, both factors of production are available in variable quantity. Yes. In perfect competition, it's actually different. And that's also something that you will probably not find in books. The difference between the short run and the long run in perfect competition is not really about costs. It's not about whether capital is fixed or variable. Here, and I will prove it to you very easily. Here, the difference is about how many firms there are in the market. In the short run, there is a fixed number of businesses, which means that there is not enough time for new firms to enter the market, and there is not enough time for existing firms to leave the market. Okay, so we take the number of businesses as given. We will have no more firms or no fewer firms. In the long run, however, there is enough time for new firms to enter, and there is enough time for existing firms to exit. So the number of firms inside the market varies. This is the difference between the short run and the long run in perfect competition. And let me just briefly convince you that this is not about cost. Think about it. You know that this is, I'll get back to this, but you know that this is how we represent the equilibrium in perfect competition, right? So this is the equilibrium in the short run. And then this is the equilibrium in the long run, okay? More businesses, blah, blah, blah. Think about it. If the difference between the short run and the long run was about cost, well, then we should not have the same ATC curve, right? We should not have the same marginal cost curve. It would also change, because from the short run to the long run, I can change the quantity of capital equipment that I have. So I would be on the short run cost curve in the short run, but I would be on the long run cost curve in the long run. So My point is that if the difference really was about whether capital is fixed or variable, we would not have one single ATC curve. We would not have one single MC curve. We would have to distinguish between the short run average cost, the long run average cost. Clearly here it doesn't change, which means that if your ATC curve doesn't change between the short run and the long run, well, that means that there is no difference in terms of whether capital or labor can be changed or not. And yes, because the difference is not about inputs, the difference is only about the number of businesses. That's not something that I really found in textbooks, but it's easy to prove it just looking at the diagram. All right, so yes. Okay. So something else that is important. Remember when we looked at revenue curves, we said that if a business faces a demand that is downward sloping, if it wants to sell more output, it needs to lower the price on all previous units. And this was the reason for which the marginal revenue was less than the average revenue. However, we've just established that in perfect competition, the individual demand curve is perfectly elastic, horizontal, which means that the business does not need to cut the price to sell more output. And that means that every time I sell one more unit, my total revenue increases by an amount that is equal to the market price, the average revenue. So for that reason, in perfect competition only, the marginal revenue is equal to the average revenue. And remember, the rule to maximize profit is always the same. It doesn't matter in which market structure you are. If you want to maximize your profit, you should produce the level of output at which MC is equal to MR. But because in perfect competition, MR is also AR, then you can just rewrite this optimum output rule. MC is equal to AR is equal to the price. This becomes your profit maximization rule in perfect competition for one individual firm, of course. Okay. So to simplify, okay, let's just say that all firms are identical. They have the same cost structure. Okay, you don't have like efficient firms and inefficient firms in terms of productions. They are all the same. So when we will look at the diagrams, the individual firm is just sometimes what we call a representative firm, one firm among many other identical firms. All right, it just simplifies. So yes, in the short run, fixed number of firms. This is what is fixed in the short run. What do? They decide how much to produce to maximize their profit. Okay, so they should produce the level of output at which MC is equal to MR, or in other words, MC is equal to AR. Same thing here. What if they make abnormal profit? It's one possibility in the short run. If they make abnormal profit in the short run, then in the long run, when there is enough time for new firms to enter, new firms will be attracted. They will see, hey, we can make a lot of money in this market. We want to join this market. Can we do it? Yes, because there are no barriers to entry. So they can enter at no cost in the market. And the consequence will be that the market supply will increase. Okay, more firms into the market, increase in market supply, and the increase in market supply will lead to a fall in the equilibrium price. Okay, so we'll have more and more firms entering. This process will stop when all this abnormal profit that existed in the short run, okay, there was some abnormal profit in the short run. Of course, if the market price decreases, this abnormal profit is going to shrink. And this entry process will stop once all the firms inside the market, they make normal profit, zero economic profit. because if everyone makes normal profit, it doesn't attract any additional firms into the market. And yes, something that is quite interesting is that if you compare, we'll see that on the diagram, each individual firm will produce less output, but overall in the market will produce more output. I'll show you that on the diagram, and then this is something that you can ask your students to challenge them. How is it possible that overall we produce more if each firm individually produces less? Interesting. Okay. And we can do the opposite case. What if in the short run, each individual firm makes a loss, negative economic profit, subnormal profit? Well, same thing. In the long run, firms will have enough time to leave the market. Can they do it? Yes, because there are no barriers to exit. So some firms will leave the market. This will lead to a decrease in the market supply. And overall, the equilibrium market price will increase. With this increase in the equilibrium price, this economic loss will decrease. Okay, the loss will decrease, so the profit will increase. And this exit process will stop. Same thing, once the remaining firms no longer make an economic loss. So basically, whenever each individual firm that is left makes normal profit, which is the case when the equilibrium price is equal to the minimum of the ATC. I forgot to mention it in the case of the entry process, but it's the same thing. Each individual firm will make normal profit when the equilibrium market price is equal to the minimum of the average total cost. Okay. And again, something that seems to be a contradiction. Overall, in the long run, we produce less than in the short run, but each individual firm will produce more. So I'll show you that on the diagram, and then we'll explain it. All right, so that's how we can explain it. This is how I represent it. So this is the market on the left. So we use side-by-side diagrams, and that's probably one of the most important diagram that your students must be able to use during the examination, especially for an essay question. So we have the market, supply, demand, and here I have what happens for an individual firm. So we have price, quantity, and if we want to be more precise, we should not write price here, but we should write cost and revenue. And you see something that I do, that I like to do, I emphasize that, yes, we have two diagrams, but we don't really have the same units because the market is considerably larger than the individual firm. So the quantity here is measured in billions, but here it's only measured in thousands, just to emphasize that one individual firm is 1 million times smaller than the overall market. I think it's useful. Otherwise, we might forget that one firm is very small compared with the overall size of the market. That's my personal touch. I think it's useful. Okay. Let's just draw a typical U-shaped ATC curve. Let's draw a typical swoosh-shaped MC curve. Okay, and then what happens? The market forces of supply and demand determine the market equilibrium price, P1, and the market quantity, capital Q1. Okay. Each individual firm takes this price as given, okay? That's I didn't write it, but AR1, MR1, I could add it. That's the individual demand, okay? That's DI. That's the individual demand facing this individual firm. Of course, if this individual firm charges a price above P1, the quantity demanded would be 0. Okay, didn't really do it, but I would have something like that. Okay, 0. And if this individual firm tried to charge a price below P1, well, the demand would be very, very large. Okay, it would be very, very large. So it's just too large, so it's irrelevant. So we don't really graph it. Okay. So that's the demand curve, the average revenue. And remember, because the firm doesn't have to cut the price to sell more output, the average revenue is also equal to the marginal revenue. This individual firm wants to maximize profit. The rule to maximize profit is MC is equal to MR. So, boom, Q1, lowercase q1. You see, uppercase is for the market quantity, lowercase is for the individual quantity. That's the quantity that maximizes profit. And we don't even have to think about what price should be charged, because the price that should be charged is just the market price, okay? The business just chooses how much to produce. It doesn't choose the price at which to sell it. And you see that for this quantity of output, this individual firm makes a positive economic profit, abnormal profit. And this area, price minus ATC times quantity, that's the profit made by this business, and it's positive. So this is a short-run equilibrium with a fixed number of businesses. Firms don't have enough time to enter. Now, if we look at what's going to happen in the long run, firms outside the market, they see, hey, there is a lot of profit that can be made in this market, so we should enter. Can they enter? Yes, because there are no barriers to entry. So they enter, market supply increases, and as a result, the equilibrium market price falls from P1 to P2, and the market quantity, uppercase Q2, increases. Okay, so lower price, more output. And of course, this entry process, because I shifted the I shifted S1 from S2 directly because I know where to stop, but you really have to see that as a gradual increase in supply and a gradual decrease in the price. And eventually, this entry process will stop as soon as the price, P2, is equal to the minimum of the ATC curve. Okay, why? Because when the price is equal to the ATC curve, so that's the new individual demand curve. Okay, so same thing. If the individual demand curve, if the individual firm tries to sell at a price above P2, same thing. Nobody wants to buy. Okay, and below P2, same thing. It's the market demand. So it's just like before. So that's the new average revenue. That's also the new marginal revenue. So our individual firm still wants to maximize profit. MC is equal to MR. So this is the quantity that maximizes profit, that generates the highest possible profit. But you see that the highest possible profit that can be made is exactly zero. So we maximize profit, but the best we can do is a zero economic profit. So that's why the entry process stops, because if you had more firms entering, the price would be below P2 and the firm would start making negative profits. So this is not something that is sustainable. This would not be a long-run equilibrium, because you would have firms starting to leave the market. This is a long-run equilibrium in perfect competition. Yes, the plural of equilibrium is equilibria in Latin. What happens in the other case? Same story. This is my short-run equilibrium, but here you see that, okay, so we maximize profit where MC is equal to MR. However, in that case, in the short run, our individual firm is making a loss. The price is lower than the ATC, and this blue shaded area represents a subnormal profit. In the long run, what's going to happen? In the long run, once we allow enough time for businesses to leave the market, then because they make a loss, some existing firms will leave the market. This will lead to a decrease in the market supply, simply because we have fewer businesses. The lower supply leads to an increase in the equilibrium market price from P1 to P2, and the lower quantity from capital Q1 to capital Q2. The individual firm takes this new price P2 as given, and this becomes the new individual demand curve, AR2, MR2. Our individual firm still wants to maximize profit, MC is equal to MR, so, but now it's MR2, this quantity Q2. And you see that at that price, the highest possible profit that the firm can make is zero normal profit, zero economic profit. So again, this exit process will stop as soon as the market price has reached the minimum of the ATC. If the price kept rising, if you had more firms exiting the market, the firms would start to make an abnormal profit. And then this would attract new firms into the market. And eventually, the price will always go back to this value, the minimum of the average total cost. When we mention economic profit, it already deducts implicit cost. Does the opportunity cost be drowned in fixed cost? No, because just like for explicit cost, you have some implicit costs that are implicit fixed costs, and you have some implicit costs that are implicit variable costs. So you cannot just say that an implicit cost is always fixed or is always variable. It can be both. So yes, the implicit cost, so for example, the implicit variable costs, they will be included in the marginal cost curve, because remember that the marginal cost only describes the variable cost. But for example, the ATC curve, which represents both fixed and variable cost, would include both implicit fixed cost and implicit variable cost. And remember what I said? Look, it sounds a bit weird. If you look at, okay, let's start with this case. You see, overall in the market, we produce less Q1 from Q2, but each firm produces more. And in this case, the case where they make profit, we produce more in the market from Q1 to Q2, but each firm produces less. How is this possible? What do you think? So in the market, for example, here we produce more overall, but when we look at how much each individual firm produces, it produces less. How can we explain it? That's a good question you can ask to challenge your students. No idea? We produce more in the market, but each firm produces less. That seems pretty counterintuitive, right? Well, that's because we have more. Answer. Yes, absolutely. Good job. We have more firms in the market. Each of them sells less. Okay, yes, got it. And that, if the students understand that, then this really signals that they understand the model. You have each firm produces less, yes, but we have more businesses, so overall we produce more. And same thing here. Overall we produce less in the market, but each firm produces more because we have less firms than before. Absolutely. Okay. Let's briefly talk about the shutdown price in the short run and the exit price in the long run. So the shutdown price is simply, well, first, what does it mean to shut down? And how is this different from exit? To shut down simply means that you stop producing for some time. Okay, you temporarily suspend production and you expect to resume production in the future. So it's temporary and it's a short run decision. Exit is more a definite decision. You stop production and you leave the market altogether. So you do not plan to resume production in the future. So and what matters for the students is that shutting down is a short-run decision, but leaving a market is a long-run decision. Okay, and what's interesting And the key message, if there is a key idea that you should convey to your students, is that in the short run, it might actually be better to keep producing even if you make a loss. Even if you make a negative economic profit, it might actually be better to stay in business. And actually, what makes it a bit complicated here is that now we get back to production theory. Now the difference between the short run and the long run is again about having fixed costs in the short run, but no fixed cost in the long run. So yes, I know it's a bit tricky. I apologize, but I'm not responsible. When we look at the equilibrium in perfect competition with the side-by-side diagram, the difference between the short run and the long run is about whether we have a fixed number of firms or a variable number of firms. When we talk about the shutdown price, we distinguish between the short run and the long run, but this is not the same definition. This is not the same distinction. Here, again, when I talk about short run, it's a period of time where we have fixed costs because we have fixed factors. And long run, it's a period of time where we have no fixed cost because we have no fixed factor. We can change the quantity of all factors of production. Let me just give you the intuition first, and then we'll go through well, you have the intuition, but let me just show you how I explain it to the students. Basically, the idea is that even if we make a loss in the short run, it might be better to produce because we make a smaller loss than if we stop producing altogether. Okay, so basically the loss that we would make if we decided to shut down is greater than the loss that we would make if we decided to continue production. Why? Because if we shut down, we still have to pay the fixed cost, okay, because it's fixed. So it doesn't matter if you produce 20, 10, 5, 1, or 0, the fixed cost is sunk. Okay, it's a sunk cost. You've incurred your cost. It's gone. You face this cost. You incur this cost no matter how much you produce. Even if you don't produce anything, you still have to pay the fixed cost. Okay. The only thing that you can do if you shut down is you can eliminate your variable cost, because yes, your variable cost is variable. So if you don't produce anything, you don't incur any variable cost, okay, but you still, of course, incur the fixed cost. So the idea here is that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you choose to shut down or if you choose to produce. In both cases, you have to pay the fixed cost. Okay, I repeat, because this is really the key point. It does not matter what you choose. You still have to pay the fixed cost. Therefore, you have to ignore it. It doesn't matter what the fixed cost is, because regardless of what your decision is, you have to pay it. When you make a decision, you have to focus, or you have to take into account cost or things or factors that change depending on the decision that you make. If you face the fixed cost no matter what, it's not relevant anymore. Okay, it's not relevant anymore. Example, if you choose to go on a holiday, you want to go to Thailand, so you buy a plane ticket for Thailand, and it's non-refundable. Okay, so even if you want to cancel your flight, even if you want to cancel your holiday, you can't get your money back. Okay, so it's what we call a sunk cost. Okay, it doesn't matter if you actually go to Thailand or if you go somewhere else, or if you don't go anywhere, if you stay home, you still have to pay that cost. It's there everywhere. Regardless of where you go, you still have to pay it. So if you are a rational decision maker, you should not take this into account. You should really say, okay, it's gone. It's sunk. So now, if I want to make the best possible economic decision, I have to focus on the cost on which I have an influence, the cost on which I still have an influence, not on the costs that are already sunk. They are irrelevant. So the idea here is that in the short run, when you have to choose whether or not to stay in business, whether you should produce or whether you should shut down, you should only look at the variable cost. And you should only ask yourself, if I still produce, can I at least cover my, or at least pay my variable cost? If it's the case, then yes, you should still produce even if you make a loss. However, if you cannot even cover your variable cost, then in that case, it is better for you to shut down, because you will make a loss, but you will make a smaller loss when shutting down rather than staying in business producing. Okay, I have other ways to explain it. It's coming. So yes, by shutting down, a firm can eliminate all variable costs, but it must still pay the fixed cost. And that's really what matters. Therefore, the fixed cost should not be considered in deciding whether to produce or to shut down. The fixed cost is sunk in the short run. It has already been incurred and cannot be recovered. Okay. Example. Now let's just try to use some numbers. If I shut down, so I don't sell anything, of course. So if I don't produce anything, my total revenue is 0. I can avoid all variable cost. So my variable cost is 0, but I still have to pay the fixed cost. Okay, so if we let's just do that step by step. This is what you can write on the whiteboard. You can say, okay, usually profit is total revenue, equal minus total cost. Okay, which is total revenue minus your variable cost plus your fixed cost. All right, but if I shut down, I don't sell anything. Oops, I didn't want to erase that. So my total revenue is 0. Okay, so it's boom, it's gone, 0 there. I can avoid the variable cost, 0. So what's left? Minus the fixed cost. Okay, so that's basically my loss if I shut down. What if I stay in business? If I stay in business, if I produce, well, that's total revenue minus total cost. Okay, so I receive the total revenue, but I have to pay the variable cost and I have to pay a fixed cost. Okay, so then I can just compare. Okay, when is this a good idea to keep producing? So it's a good idea to stay in business, okay, not to shut down. If this is greater than this, okay, if the profit when staying in business is greater than the profit when shutting down. And if you just rearrange the terms, you see that the fixed cost cancels out because it is there no matter what. It doesn't matter if you stay in business or if you shut down, you still have to pay it. So it's irrelevant. It vanishes. It cancels out. And basically, you see that overall, you should stay in business as long as you can at least pay your variable cost, as long as your total revenue is greater than your variable cost. And if I divide by Q, by the quantity on both sides, so TR divided by Q, that's AR, that's the price. Total variable cost divided by Q, that's the average variable cost. So as long as the price is greater than my average variable cost, I should stay in business. So you see, it's only the variable cost, not the total cost. So yeah, so the consequence is that the shutdown price, and you have the intuition, of course. The consequence is that as long as the price is larger than the minimum of the AVC, average variable cost, then you can make a smaller loss by staying in business than by shutting down. But if the price is lower than the average variable cost, well, then in that case, you are better off shutting down. You will make a loss, but a smaller loss than if you tried to keep producing. And that's how you can see it. Okay, so some cost curves. So that's the individual demand curve. Boom, boom, boom. We maximize profit. MC is equal to MR. Okay, so that's the ATC. That's the AVC. No problem. So, and the difference between the average variable cost and the average total cost, that's my average fixed cost. You'll see that's going to be very useful. Okay, so what is my total revenue? Well, my total revenue, price times quantity. Okay, it's there. What is my total cost? Total cost, ATC times quantity. Okay, so clearly here, it's not good because my total cost is greater than my total revenue. So I make a loss. This is my loss, okay? That's my negative economic profit, subnormal profit. Okay. I can be more specific and I can divide, or I can split my total cost between my total variable cost and my total fixed cost, okay? The bottom part is my total variable cost and the top part is my total fixed cost. So what if I choose to stay in business? So I keep producing. So if I keep producing, that's what I lose. That's the negative profit that I make if I stay in business, if I choose not to shut down. What if I choose to shut down? Well, if I choose to shut down, remember what happens. If I choose to shut down, I lose the entire fixed cost, okay? So if I choose to shut down, I lose the entire fixed cost. So you see that what you lose if you shut down is more than what you lose if you stay in business, if you keep producing. So even if you make a loss in the short run, it's still better to keep producing because you can, if you look at your total revenue covers all of your variable costs, okay, the gray area, the light gray area. Your total revenue can pay all of your variable costs and some of the fixed costs. That's why it's better. You see this area? Your total revenue can also cover some of the fixed costs. And that's why it is better to stay in business rather than to shut down. Yeah. So the conclusion is that, yes, your shutdown price, which is the minimum price below which you should shut down, it's the minimum, not of the ATC, but the minimum of the average variable cost, because only the variable costs are relevant to that decision in the short run, because the fixed cost is sunk. The exit price works is very similar, but there is a big difference, is that now we are in the long run. So there is no more fixed cost, okay? Because I can change the quantity of all FOPs, so all factors of production are variable, so there is no more fixed cost. And this has a very important consequence. I'll start with this, yes. Just let's look at this for now. Because in that case, if I choose to leave, to exit, I don't lose anything, okay? Because I don't have a fixed cost. There are no barriers to exit. So in the long run, if a business chooses to exit, well, it makes just a zero economic profit, no more profit, okay? And if I choose to stay in business, then, of course, my profit is the total revenue minus total cost. So the consequence, same thing. When should I stay in business? When should I leave? I should stay in business if this is greater than this. So if TR is greater than TC, and same thing, if I divide by Q, this means that the average revenue, which is the price, must be at least equal to the ATC. So you see the difference? Shut down. I must make sure that the price is at least equal to the average variable cost. We only focus on the variable cost. However, when we look at the long run, I will stay in business. as long as my average revenue is greater than my average total cost. Okay, that is the idea here, simply because it doesn't cost anything to leave the market. Because if I leave the market, I do not incur any variable cost and I do not incur any fixed cost as well. So yes, what is the exit rule in the long run? A firm will leave the market once and for all if the price is less than the minimum of the average total cost. We can represent it here. That's my exit price in the long run. And this would be my shutdown price in the short run. So any price above, actually, let's just summarize. This is something that I didn't do, but why not? It could be quite useful. So that's the shutdown price. SDP, shutdown price. That's a good way to summarize, actually. I should add that to the PPT. So any price below the shutdown price, the firm would shut down in the short run and it would exit in the long run. Any price between the shutdown price and the exit price, the firm would keep producing in the short run, but it would exit in the long run. And any price above the exit price, the firm would keep producing in the short run and in the long run as well. But in the long run, the price cannot really be above the exit price, because remember that in the long run, if we allow the number of firms to vary, the price will always be equal to the minimum of the ATC. So in reality, in the long run, if we allow the number of firms to vary, the price will always be equal to the exit price. So just the minimum price that firms must receive so they stay in the market. And that's why this is when the entry or exit process stops, of course. Okay, now there are only two things we have to do. I know it's already past 9, but it's going to be quick. We need to talk about efficiency and we need to talk about supply curves. Efficiency, it's very easy. We need to determine whether allocative, productive, and economic efficiency will be achieved in the market in perfect competition. And I'm just going to use the diagrams, the previous diagrams that we used, like the short run and long run equilibrium. Let's use this one. Okay. So this is my short run equilibrium. Let's look at the right-hand side diagram. Let's see what happens for one individual firm. Does this firm, sorry, does this firm achieve productive efficiency? Remember that for one business, productive efficiency is achieved when the firm produces the level of output that minimizes the average total cost. Okay, so in our case, this would be here. That's a very big arrow. This would be the productively efficient level of output. That's better. Okay. Does the firm produces this level of output in the short run? No. So yes, and that's never going to be the case, actually. Well, never. Yeah, it's unlikely. At least in the short run, what you can keep in mind is that perfectly competitive firms are productively inefficient. They will not produce the level of output that minimizes the ATC curve. Are they productively efficient in the long run? Yes. Look at that. That's magic. In the long run, the firm produces Q2, which is the level of output that minimizes the ATC curve. So yes, so basically productive efficiency, no in the short run, yes in the long run. We can look at the other diagram that considers the other case when the firm makes subnormal profit, and you see that's exactly the same thing. Is the firm productively efficient in the short run? Well, no. This is the level of output that minimizes the ATC curve. The firm produces Q1, that's not enough. So the firm is productively inefficient in the short run. Is it productively efficient in the long run? Yes, in the long run, it produces Q2, which is indeed the productively efficient level of output. Okay, so what do we learn from this? Productive efficiency, yes in the long run, no in the short run. Now, how about allocative efficiency. So allocative efficiency, there are several ways you can look at it, but perhaps the easiest way is to remember that allocative efficiency is achieved when the marginal cost is equal to the average revenue. Why? Because the average revenue is the price. Okay, we can see it here. And the price measures the marginal benefit of consumption. I repeat, the market price is equal to the marginal benefit of consumption. You can review the workshop on efficiency just to convince yourself that this is the case. Price is the marginal benefit of consumption. So the average revenue is the marginal benefit of consumption. I can write it, yes, what we have there here. So this is MB1 and this is MB2, marginal benefit of consumption. And allocative efficiency is achieved when the marginal cost of production is equal to the marginal benefit of consumption. Yes, to me, that's the easiest way to put it, to explain it, to make sense out of it. But yes, if your students want to just remember that it is when MC is equal to AR, it works. Okay, they will not make mistakes like this. So let's start with the short run. Let's get back to the first case where businesses make abnormal profit. Okay, and let's look at the short run equilibrium. Do we have allocative, sorry, that's right there. Do we have allocative efficiency within this market? Well, yes, look at Q1. At Q1, the marginal cost is equal to the marginal benefit. Okay, marginal cost is the red curve. The marginal benefit is the demand curve in this case. Okay, it's horizontal, it's given. So yes, we have allocative efficiency. You can also look at it in the individual, in the market. You can look at it for one individual firm, but you can also look at it here. Remember that the supply curve is just the marginal cost curve. The difference is that what we have here is the individual marginal cost. Okay. And here's the market or the total or the aggregate marginal cost. And same thing, the demand curve is the marginal benefit. And actually for allocative efficiency, I like I would rather look at the market diagram rather than the individual firm diagram. It makes more sense. So yes, the demand curve, the market demand curve represents the marginal benefit of consumption. The market supply curve shows the marginal cost of consumption. Okay, so you see that, and that's as simple as that. Supply, anytime you have supply is equal to demand, you have allocative efficiency. Of course, given that there are no externalities, given that there are no merit or demerit goods. But yeah, you do have allocative efficiency, which basically means that yes, at that particular level of output Q1, you do maximize total surplus. Okay, if I continue, let me just try to illustrate it a bit better. If I continue the demand curve, blah, 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 and if I continue the supply curve, all right, well, then this area, I don't know how I'm going to identify it clearly. Let's just put some beautiful red hearts or orange hearts. This beautiful, too much love. This beautiful area is the total surplus generated by this competitive market. That's total surplus, and it is maximized because yes, the supply is equal to demand, marginal benefit of consumption is equal to the marginal cost of production. So do we have allocative efficiency in the short run? Yes, we do have it. Do we have allocative efficiency in the long run? Same thing, for the exact same reason. Yes, we also have allocative efficiency in the long run, same thing. So the demand curve has not changed. So the demand curve is still my marginal benefit of consumption, no problem. The new supply curve is the new marginal cost of production. Okay, the total in the market. Okay, not for one individual firm. This is the sum of marginal cost, if you want. And again, in the new market equilibrium, marginal cost of production is equal to marginal benefit of consumption. So we do have allocative efficiency. total surplus is maximized, there is no deadweight loss. If you want to look at it in the individual firm diagram, you can also see it, because in the long run, we're going to produce Q2, and at Q2, the marginal cost of that business, not the total marginal cost, but the marginal cost of that business is equal to the marginal benefit, which is simply given by the market price over there. So it doesn't really matter how you look at it. You can look at it from the perspective of the total market. You can look at it from the perspective of one individual firm. Both diagrams can be used to explain that we achieve allocative efficiency in the short run and in the long run. So to summarize, allocative efficiency, yes in the short run, yes in the long run. Productive efficiency, no in the short run, yes in the long run. Economic efficiency, which requires both allocative and productive efficiency, is only achieved in the long run, okay? Because it is only in the long run that we have both productive and allocative efficiency. In the short run, we do not achieve economic efficiency, because even though we have allocative efficiency, we do not achieve productive efficiency. And that's it. That's all your students must know about efficiency in perfect competition. So here you have a summary, and here you have basically what I said. All right. Short run, we have allocative efficiency. We don't have productive efficiency, so therefore economic efficiency. In the long run, both allocative and productive efficiency, and therefore we do achieve economic efficiency. This is not very important. Finally, and then we can take a rest, the concept of supply curve. What is it? A supply curve, you know what this is, but in this PPT, we are mostly going to focus on the individual supply curve, because in AS or even in A2, we have mostly looked at market supply curves, but it's also interesting to look at the individual supply curve. So basically, if you are one business and you take the price as given, you are price taker, how much output should you supply to maximize your profit? Okay, that's what a supply curve is about. For any given market price, what quantity of product should you supply if you want to maximize your profit? Okay, and to understand what your individual supply curve is going to look like, there are a few things that we have to remember. First, we have to remember the optimum output rule. MC is equal to MR. No problem. That's the rule to maximize profit. Also, we have to remember that in perfect competition, the marginal revenue is equal to the average revenue. Okay, we don't have to cut the price to sell more output. We can sell as much as we want at the market price. So my marginal revenue is just the price, which means that to maximize my profit, I'll skip that. To maximize my profit, I have to choose to produce the level of output at which the price is equal to the marginal cost. Okay, price is equal to marginal cost. This is too advanced. Necessary but not sufficient. You can skip that. Okay, you can delete it. This is just to emphasize that it's just a first order condition. So we have we need a second order condition to make sure that we have a maximum and not a minimum, but it's too advanced, so skip it. I realized in the past that this tends to confuse, not to consume, but to confuse students. And in the short run, a firm will not produce anything if the price falls below the minimum of the average variable cost. Okay. And I think that's it. Okay. And all right. And in the long run, you will not produce anything if the price is below the minimum of the ATC. Okay. So with this information, we can find out what the individual supply curve is going to look like. I think we have enough. Yes. And actually, the best way to do it is just to start with a diagram. Okay, you can start with this and can I start with this? Right. Okay. And let's say that's how I do it with the students. Let's say that we are in the short run. Okay. And please help me with this. Okay, I don't want to do it alone. Please help me. And what I do is I take several prices. So we can identify the shutdown price. It's there. Minimum of the average variable cost. That's my shutdown price. No problem. What if I take a price below the shutdown price? Please help me out. What if the price is there? What quantity should I produce to maximize my profit? In that case, if the price is there, how much should I produce in the short run to maximize my profit? If the price is there in the short run, please, let's do it together. How much should I produce if the price is here? Let's give it a name. Let's call it P1. P1 is less than the shutdown price. So what should I do? I know, guys, it's late, but let's try to do it together. How much should I produce? Should I shut down or should I stay in business in this case? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I should shut down. So shutting down means that I should produce 0. Okay. So if the price is less than the shutdown price, the quantity that I should supply to maximize my profit, to be more precise, to minimize my loss, is actually 0. So any price below the shutdown price, the quantity supplied should be 0. Okay. Now, what if the price is there, let's say here? Let's call it P2. Above the shutdown price. Okay, so the price is here. How much should I produce? Well, in that case, if the price is P2, so I can graph a horizontal line that just represents where P2 is. Remember that to maximize your profit, the rule is MC is equal to MR, but MR is just the price. Okay, that's MR2. If the price is P2, my marginal revenue is just P2. And therefore, to maximize my profit, I should produce this quantity. Up. Let's call it Q2. So now I should not shut down, even if I make a loss, because yes, here I make a loss, but because I make a smaller loss by producing rather than shutting down, I should produce. And finally, if the price is, say, over there, let's call that P3. How much should I produce to maximize my profit? So we can do the same thing. I draw a horizontal line, up, 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 up. And this new price, P3, becomes my new marginal revenue, MR3. And therefore, to maximize my profit, I should produce this quantity. Up, Q3. And then, of course, you could do that. You can do that with more prices, but it's not really necessary. Students, they see very quickly that as soon as you take a price that is above the shutdown price, the quantity that you have to produce is always given by the marginal cost curve. Okay. It's always, for example, given by this point there, this point there. And if I took more prices above the shutdown price, my supply curve would simply be given by the marginal cost curve. So if I draw my supply curve above the shutdown price, it would simply be something like that. Because yes, the marginal cost curve tells me for any given market price, how much you should produce to maximize your profit, which is the definition of a supply curve. So in the short run, the individual supply curve is the marginal cost curve, or to be more precise, it's the portion of the marginal cost curve that is above the shutdown price. Below the shutdown price, it's 0. And then above the shutdown price, you can even connect that if you want. All right. So you have something continuous. That is your individual supply curve in the short run. 0 below the shutdown price and the equal to the marginal cost. So that's your supply curve, individual supply curve in the short run. Sometimes I call it the short run individual supply curve. So SRIS, short run individual supply curve. In the long run, it's different, even if it's not very relevant, because in the long run, remember, the price will always be equal to the minimum of the ATC. But sorry, in the long run, what is important is not the shutdown price, it's the exit price. But I repeat, the long run individual supply curve is not as relevant because EP for exit price, because the price will always be equal to the exit price, but we can just pretend what would happen if this was not the case. Well, again, if the price in the long run is less than the exit price, then the firm is going to leave to exit the market, and therefore the supply will be 0. Okay, so we are in the long run now. Okay, this is the long run. Just I use the same diagram, but we are in the long run. Below the exit price, the firm leaves, and therefore it does not supply anything. And again, if you have any price above the exit price, could be any price, and you want to find out what quantity you should produce to maximize your profit, well, that's exactly the same reasoning. Okay, this new price becomes your marginal revenue, because we are in perfect competition. So the price is the marginal revenue. You maximize your profit where MC is equal to MR, and therefore again the marginal cost curve, or to be more precise, the portion of the marginal cost curve that lies above the exit price, is your long run individual supply curve. So we would have something like that. This would be your long run individual supply curve. So you can even connect it, something like that. So you see the difference? In the short run, we had something like that, up, 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 with like the dotted line. And in the long run, we have the solid line. Okay, that's what we mean by short run or long run individual supply curve. Let's summarize and then we are done. Okay, so I can summarize this. In the short run, the individual supply curve is the increasing section of the marginal cost curve that is above the average variable cost. So that means above the shutdown price. Yes. And in the long run, the individual supply curve is same thing, the increasing section of the marginal cost curve that lies above the minimum of the ATC, because this is the exit price. Okay. Below the AVC, the supply curve is just vertical at 0. And same thing, below the exit price, the long run individual supply curve is vertical at 0, because the firm has left. We could even represent the market supply curves. We just have to add the individual supply curves, but this is outside the scope of the A2 syllabus. So I'm just going to show you briefly, but I'm not going to talk about it. So if we are in the short run, this is my short run individual supply curve. And honestly, we could even add this horizontal section to connect the two portions. Okay, that's my short run individual supply curve. This would be the market supply curve. So I just add, but it's, you see, one step further, not interesting. This would be the long run individual supply curve. So same thing, I can connect these two sections, no problem. So you see the difference now. It's equal to 0 below the exit price, not below the shutdown price. And I can even show, which is a complicated diagram, the long run market supply, tough diagram. So it's outside the scope of the syllabus. This is what it would look like. But I don't have time to talk about this, and it's way beyond the scope of the syllabus. If you have taught AP economics, then this diagram must look familiar, because for AP economics, students are expected to know that, and they also have to know what is the difference between a constant cost industry and an increasing cost industry, but it's, and a decreasing cost industry as well, but we don't do that in A level. Okay, and I have designed this simple exercise to conclude the the chapter on perfect competition. So typical cost curves, and yeah, they are just some simple questions. At what price would the firm just make normal profit? So normal profit, of course, when the price is equal to the minimum of the ATC. So P0 is when I make normal profit. Okay, I maximize my profit, but the best profit that I can make is 0. What area would represent the fixed cost at that price? So at that price, I produce this quantity QO, and the vertical distance between my AVC and my ATC, that's my ATC, the average fixed cost. Sorry, the vertical distance is the average fixed cost. So if I multiply by the quantity, I have the average, I have the total fixed cost. I'm tired. Yes, the total fixed cost is this gray shaded area. What is the shutdown price? Well, the shutdown price is the minimum of the average variable cost, P lower bar. This is the shutdown price. Within what range of prices would the firm choose to operate at a loss in the short run? So we do not shut down, but we make negative profit. So if we do not shut down, it means that the price is above the shutdown price, above P lower bar. But if we make a loss, it means that the price is below P0, because this is the price at which we make exactly 0 profit. So this is the range where my profit is greater than minus the fixed cost, but still negative. Within what range of prices would the firm be able to make abnormal profit in the short run? So we make abnormal profit if the price is greater than P0. Okay, because at P0 we make normal profit, above P0 we make abnormal profit. So any price above P0. And identify the firm's short-run supply curve. Well, same thing, the firm's short-run supply curve. Below the shutdown price, it's 0. And above the shutdown price is simply the marginal cost curve. And again, because I don't really like this anymore, I like to connect the two sections. I think it's better this way. Okay. This would be the firm, the individual supply curve in the short run. In the long run, we would have something like that. I'll just put it like this. In the long run, we would have something like that. Pop, 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 pop. And then it would be the same, right? So the dotted line would be the long run individual supply curve, and the solid line is a short run individual supply curve. And yes, we are done. All right, so as always, here are the documents you can find on the website. So I'm still working on the summary, by the way, so that's why you don't have it on the website. I'm almost done. I've done most of it, but I still need to finish a few things with the summary, so it will be there probably tomorrow. But you have all the rest. You have the definitions of perfect competition. Not that many, actually. Look, just that. And the concept cards. So let's see what are the drawing challenges. Donald Duck for the drawing challenge. Okay, do you guys have any questions? Tell me if you do. Any questions? Or are we all good with perfect competition? No questions? Okay, So tomorrow, for those attending the AS workshops, we will. What are we going to talk about tomorrow? Sorry, taxes and subsidies. Yes, taxes and subsidies for AS for the AS workshop. So just one topic, but it's a big one. And the next week, no workshops. But after the holiday, we'll talk about monopoly. Big topic too for A2. And for AS, after the holiday, we'll have our last workshop on minimum or price controls, so minimum and maximum prices, as well as other policy instruments. And that will be the end of the AS workshops, 1 week after the holiday. All right, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Again, this was a long workshop, but I hope it was instructive. And again, you will have the video recording online shortly. And the last, the summary on perfect competition probably tomorrow as well. Good night, everyone, and see you next, not next week, so maybe tomorrow if you come to the AS workshop. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks after the holiday. Take care. See you soon. Bye.